All right, guys, welcome to lesson 3. Like I said, this is my favorite way to assess my students as we're going through a unit. And it's using class time to maximize instructions. And because I think so many people get stuck in what I call the homework cycle. And the homework cycle is simply this. You give out the homework, you did what you were told to do. You lecture bell to bell, you teach that whole period. And you get to the end of the period, you hand out the homework, and then you get mixed results when it comes in the next day. Some of your kids did it perfectly. Some of your kids didn't even try. And then there's this big group in the middle that kind of did it, maybe even did on it wrong. And so then you're left with 3 choices. You can collect the homework, put comments on it, give it back to the kids, and hope somehow they read them. Granted, you should know as well as I do, the chances of kids reading the comments on the homework that you hand back is minimal. And the kids who are going to read the comments are the kids who did good enough anyway. They're your studious kids to begin with. Most kids, oh, I made an 83. All right, that's the end of it. You can go over the homework in class, and you spend half the period or more going through the homework and essentially reteaching it somewhat. Or you can just do a full out reteach. Trying to help the kids unlearn some of the bad ways they did it over the previous evening. Here's the problem. You spend half your period doing that, you do the new lecture, and the whole cycle repeats all over again. And you get stuck in this pattern over and over and over again of having to, really just, you're always trying to explain, you're always playing catch up. And so the question is, what do we need? What do our kids need? What do we need? And the answer is feedback. We need feedback on where our kids are at. We need to know where they are, what struggles they're having, where are they making mistakes, those kind of things. Our kids need feedback from us about where they're making those mistakes. They need ways to correct themselves or even a mental mistake. All right, so this is essential for student-driven pacing, what I talked about in lesson 2. If we don't have this feedback, if we don't have some way of assessing where our kids are and how they're understanding things, then it makes student-driven pacing really, really difficult. And so what are our options? We could do something like we keep doing the homework cycle. Yeah. You could do something like a flipped classroom, which I think would also just be the amount of effort it would take to do that. I know you can reuse it later, years later, but the amount of effort, I've got 2 young kids at home. The idea of putting in that amount of effort, no thank you. You can do lots of quizzes during the unit, but I feel like that drags out the unit because it just uses up time. I'm not a fan of it. So for me, it's about using class time and how I can use it differently. So for me, what I do is I trim lecture, and then I use class time for classwork and homework. This can really work for any lessons, but this is best used for lessons that are skills-based, like your nomenclature, conversions, mole conversions, quantum mechanical model where you're doing your electron configurations, things like that. Or in the atomic theory unit when you're doing protons, neutrons, and electrons in atoms and isotopes and ions. When you're doing those skill-based things, this really, really works well. It can work for, just facts, but not as well. But what I'll do is I'll trim my lecture, and I'm talking half to 2/3 of the class period I'll teach, actively teach, from the board, teaching all the kids. After that, I'm going to hand out classwork. Now, I like to do a classwork assignment first, and then I'll check it or I'll collect it or I'll grade it. It's something happens there sometimes. And then I'll hand out the homework. Sometimes it's just straight up homework. And then the key to this method is not to go sit down. The key is I'm now actively walking around checking on my students. And there are some days where I'm just blah, and I want to sit down. Sometimes I listen to those voices and I sit down, but nobody's perfect on this. But I do want to encourage you, get up, walk around, interact with the kids. We all have bad days. Just don't let it be the norm. So get up, walk around, and actively check. For me, my first priority are my kids who are struggling, and then my quiet kids. the ones who are never going to ask a question in class, the ones who I really don't like calling on in class because it makes them nervous and anxious. But I found that during this classwork time, I can approach them and we can interact, and I can slowly over the course of the year build their confidence up so that they can, yeah, come out of their shell through the course of the year. All right. So, like I said, it's great for weak kids. It's great for shy kids. The other group that it's really good for is those kids who have been doing really well in school until they hit chemistry and algebra 2. And then all of a sudden they start freaking out because they don't get it immediately. Like, oh, Mr. Anderson, I got number 1 wrong. I'll never be able to do this. Hey, let me look at it. Oh, you just flipped this. Remember I said da-da-da-da? And they're like, oh, okay. All right, try number 2. Hey, Mr. Anderson, I got it. It's amazing how well that works. That because so many of those kids, like, they do it wrong, and then they're like, oh, I can never do this. And I'm like, whoa, stop. Let's see what you did. Oh, you just made this one little mistake. Let's fix it. We fix it and we move on. Or whenever, another reason why I love this is because I can make sure kids are practicing it correctly. Because if a kid goes home and does 10 conversion problems and flips every single one of those, it's now so much harder for me to go back and unteach them and then teach them the right method. If I can correct it here in class and catch those small mistakes early on, it saves me so many headaches later on. It's beautiful that way, and why I love it. Like I said, it works well for students who make small mistakes. And I definitely allow peer tutoring. I allow my brighter kids to help my weaker kids that are struggling. I'll sometimes seat them that way with my seating arrangement. Now, this requires coaching those stronger kids, that they do not just give them answers. They do not let them copy their work. They actually have to help them learn how to do it. That takes coaching. That takes a little bit of instruction from me to help those stronger kids to not just spoon feed them, but to help them and carry them along, because there's only one me. And if I'm in class with 20 minutes left, I can't help 30 kids in 20 minutes. It's not possible. I prioritize who I work with, and I help those kids out. But once again, it creates an atmosphere. And once you do this enough, the kids really learn to value and use this time well. I'm really hard on kids who are not on task during this time. I really watch it like a hawk. It's not time to chit chat. It's not time to study for another class. It's not time to look for that, study for that test next period. That's not what this is for. And I will deal with those things and address those and give them consequences as needed. But as a whole, once the class learns how to do this, and once you learn how to do this, it's a beautiful method that I don't have to take home a stack of homework and write comments all over it. I don't have to give out a whole bunch of quizzes throughout the unit. I'll give some, but as a whole, I'm assessing where they're at in class. And then I'm giving them homework, and then when that homework comes back, because I know they practice it well in class, I can do a really quick check, which cuts down on my grading time. And that's another reason why I love this, because I'm trying to cut down on the amount of time I've got to spend outside of class. And this is a great time-saving method for doing just that. All right, action step. Identify at least one lesson in this unit or an entire unit that you want to give this a try. Just once again, if you're at the beginning of the year, the first unit where I think you would really be able to do this really well is when you get to atomic theory, atomic history, and you're trying to identify protons, neutrons, and electrons, and isotopes and ions. Make a classwork sheet where you give kids hey, here's iron, here's silver 1 plus, here's calcium 2 plus, here's carbon 14, here's carbon 12. Give them a sheet like that and make them figure out the protons, neutrons, and electrons. Walk around, make sure they're doing it right. Make sure they understand it. Unless it's an ion, protons and electrons are the same. Unless it's an isotope, use the mass on the periodic table, those kind of things. You're making sure they understand what they need to understand as you go along. All right. So, if you're later in the year, think about what unit you're in. Are you in quantum mechanics? Are you in, nomenclature? Great unit for it. By the way, when I get into kind of hairier units where it's a big skill like nomenclature, reactions, balancing reactions, predicting products, moles of stoichiometry, that kind of stuff, I have taken it where I've done this for an entire period, where I didn't lecture at all. All we did is I gave them a homework assignment, essentially, and I said, all right, y'all got the class period to work on this. If you finish it, no homework. If you don't finish it, you got to finish it for homework. And then we get working on it, and I'm walking around the whole class period doing this because it is so helpful. You know, when I'm trying to first do mole conversions or conversions in general, I spend the whole day doing conversions, doing this. I teach it super, super fast, like literally like 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. And then it's just simply let them loose and let them work. Because the only way they're going to learn conversions isn't me doing a bunch of them on the board. The way that they're going to learn conversions is by working through them on their own and seeing where they're making mistakes and fixing those mistakes. So I'll do this for a whole class period sometimes. So that's lesson 3. And look forward to seeing you in the next lesson.